With all the ongoing changes to the walls and windows on this side of the house, I'm already starting to forget how certain parts looked before. And with the weather forecast for this week thankfully being a lot better than it was last week, I'm hoping we can make good progress this week so that by the end of it, we might be able to give you a new, clearer look at how this side of the house is going to look in the future. And on the first morning, the skies were clear, but the wind was blowing, and it was pretty chilly when I was opening up. And then helping Miguel and Fodo get set up. First, outside. And then on the upper floor of the extension, where work on the two openings on the church side would be the initial priority. Haggy then arrived with some more materials. And after the main unloading, we all returned to the wall work with some lifting in of bricks to be used to fill in one of the openings on the inside where a stone finish will not be needed. While waiting for my next support task, I chipped away some of the old bricks back to where the new edge will be built up later on. And my next task was to find some better stones from lower down the rock pile. Before being called back in to help with some more lifting in of the bricks. With the wind having practically disappeared, it's such a nice day down here that I thought I'd take a bit of a break and talk briefly about working with stones, which is not something I'd ever done before. As you would have seen from all the videos over the last year when I've been doing work with stones, there's no part of the process that is fast, whether you are excavating them or quarrying them and then getting them into a place where you want to store them, and then when you want to actually find the right stone that you want to use and then putting it into a wall. Each step in that process is slow, and all of them have their frustrations, not least when you think you've found a perfect or beautiful stone and then it breaks and you then can't use it, which happens quite a lot. But despite the frustrations and the slow pace of the work, there is something wonderful about working with stones, not least when you've quarried them on the site and then you find a perfectly shaped one, and then in the hands of a mason who is a master at building the wall, seeing it fit in perfectly to the overall form and look of the house. It's incredibly satisfying to see that. And the work over the last 2 weeks in particular, when we've been doing the work on that front wall, has just highlighted to me that all of the effort and all of the pain at times is worth it when the final result is as beautiful as some of the sections up there. So hopefully, with a few more parts of the house to patch up, some of these better stones that I've been filtering out now will find a home in one part of the wall that will make it look wonderful, and maybe it'll stay there for the next 200, 300 years.
Oh, yes. Con el Jadi. Mano.
Here.
Non so se stava la pacchetta della presa.
The second morning was slightly less chilly than the first and certainly a bit more colourful. And after getting set up, we got back to work on the two openings, where Haggy would be rebuilding the window opening, Photo would be supplying mortar and stones, with some occasional help from me upstairs, and Miguel would be rebuilding and repairing the rest of the facade with stones. By the mid-morning break, we were starting to make reasonable progress, considering the challenges of the working spaces and the supply line. With enough stones ready for Miguel to use, I went downstairs for some preparations for other upcoming work on reopening the old side door and checking the measurements and options of some cornerstones. My search for cornerstones has brought me to here, where in the past I did have some good cornerstones that I used for some steps, but I can't remember if we took them out or whether we buried them. And in case we did bury them, I'm just going to have a bit of a dig to see if I can take them out.
Levanta. Sácalo por acá.
Well, the dig was worth it. There are 4 reasonably good-sized cornerstones in here, which we must have buried when Luis was doing his excavation work of this front terrace in the summer. And I think we must have done it in a bit of a hurry, and I forgot to step in and retrieve these beforehand. Anyway, we've got them now, and I might just check some photos of this area to see if there are more in there, and hopefully we'll be able to use these, perhaps in the area that I was looking at earlier that will be a new entrance. Day 3 started with another clear and fresh morning, ideal for making progress on the walls and windows, especially some final tidying up of the front wall by Haggy. Although I wouldn't be much help while I was meeting with Tony the Technico to review the plans for some of the next work. And my first task after the meeting was to do some more digging, this time to check the exact position of the bedrock under the outside wall next to the future opening of the entrance. See? Having finished some final repairs on the front wall, Haggy and Fodo were now taking the scaffolding down from the front, and while they were doing this, I was pleased to welcome to the house Sean from New York. After my lunch, I returned for some more bedrock checking, while Haggy and Fodo put up some more scaffolding for the next window work around the corner. Day 4 looked like it might have a colourful start, and after the progress the day before, it looked like we might also reach an exciting milestone. For the first task of the day, I was back to filling the water deposit, while Photo mixed mortar, and Miguel did some final work on the sidewall. Then I started tidying up the front, and now that it was clear as scaffolding. And Haggy arrived with some new beams for the new window openings on the entrance side of the house. And with the beams unloaded and lifted, everyone returned to their work.
Tenemos liñola aquí. No, una fuerte, la marca ya. Está marcada. ¿Está bien?
Sí.
Tiro yo, ¿vale? Sí. Aguanta fuerte. Vale, ya está. Ya.
With the scaffolding now down from both the front and the church side of the extension, for the first time we can actually see how these newly rebuilt walls and windows are going to look in the future. And I'm very excited by them. But before I show them to you, I thought it'd be a nice idea to remind you of how that wall has looked since I first saw the property. And I'm going to look at it on my iPad and talk you through them, but I'll add the pictures in onto the video later on. On the front wall of the extension, this is how it looked the very first day that I saw the property. And then here's a version of it just after I bought the property. And as you can see, it had a mix of external structures, added on bits, open doorways, bricked in doorways, and all of it generally in bad condition. And then this was after some initial work to make some parts safer and stop people being able to break in so easily. After which I painted the red bricks to make them look a little, I guess, garish. And then I did some work to remove the cube structure and balcony from the front, which I did before I actually started the channel, but I did share some photos of it in one of the original videos. And this was about halfway through that work. And then this was after finishing that removal work, which is just about how things looked when I started the channel. And then this was when we did the work on the internal wall and had to remove sections that were in really bad condition so that we could actually remove the rubble from inside and then rebuild the floor more safely. And when we finished that work, we bricked in the openings and created the temporary entrance with the wooden doors. And that was how the wall remained until we started the recent roof work, when we put the scaffolding up on this side of the house. And then with the roof work complete, just before Christmas, we started the final work on these walls, first creating the wider ground floor opening, and then gradually adding stones to the openings and old brick sections, which we've continued this month. And that brings us up to today for the front part of the extension. And then on the church side of the extension, this was how it looked when I first saw the property, and then here are some of the ways it evolved when I did some of the work on the front, and then more recently when we were doing some work with the scaffolding around it. So it's been a pretty gradual change since I first bought the house. Obviously accelerated a lot more recently with the builders on site. And if you were wondering how that wall or that section had got into the state that it was in, I did do a video 25, where I explained what I thought had happened to that wall in the past. So that's quite useful information for the context of the changes. Anyway, now let's go and have a look at the walls. First up, here's a closer look at the church side wall, which Miguel has spent the last couple of days repairing right at the top. And then also a little bit on this wall where there were some odd bits of plaster and brick. An important point for both of these walls to point out is that these are by no means the finished look. It's just the structural work that we've done so far. So all of the openings where you've got these bricks and these beams will actually have a pretty thick mortar edge about this sort of colour and of a similar sort of thickness and width to the surrounds of the openings on this wall. So we've still got to do all that work. That'll be in the future. And for these big double spaces, this will be a double sliding door, and the single one up there, we've got to decide what mechanism to use on it. And then moving on to the front wall, an important point to make about all the walls is actually that we've still got a lot of repointing work to do. So the visual effect of the wall will be a little bit different, and this one has now got a lot of dust on it, and with a bit of rain it'll start to look a bit darker. And I think the one thing I wanted to mention about the way that the masons have put this together is that we wanted to make it a little bit irregular, and there are various patches where there are different size stones, and we've kept as many of the original sections and some random cornerstones in various parts. So it's a little more irregular, just like the rest of the house is. Anyway, I'm extremely pleased with how it's looking, and we're now moving around the corner to continue the work on the other walls, and we'll get on with that tomorrow.
Lo que pasa lo tengo el coche. Nunca deja el camión. Mañana sí.
On day 5, I think it's fair to say we all had a particularly strong Friday feeling after seeing the results of the wall work the day before. But our focus now switched to the entrance side and new openings for it. Haggy working on the section where there had been a window in the past. And Miguel working on a new window around the corner. And with more work due to move inside at some stage, I started some tidying up to make sure we had enough space. And after throwing out the rubble, it was time to smooth it out below for a better platform for scaffolding when we work on the second half of the roof.
No, buena, ¿De qué empezamos? Esto lo que le ha tocado.
Toda la gente que nos dedicamos más o menos a emergencias, a rescates, tienes un poco, digamos, hay una especie de...
And that is the end of work for this week, where for the last 2 days, all of the action has been in this area. First with Haggy reopening and widening the window up there, and then Miguel creating the new window on this wall. And next week we'll look to finish those two and then create some more openings on these walls, which should dramatically change the look of the house on this side, in a similar way to how work on these front walls has transformed both the look of the house from the outside and the light and views from the inside. So please do tune in next week to see how we get on.